I got the wagon in, gave myself plenty of room to work with. I want to get it in the air and put it on stands or blocks or something. I got to figure out what I'm going to use because it's dirt. Let's go over the things I want to do while I'm elbow deep in this. So the stock fuel filter is down here. You can just barely see it right there. Honda decided on this generation of Accords to put it down under the brake booster, down on the car's frame. And it's insanely hard to get to, and you need a crow's foot wrench to get to it. It's just kind of ridiculous. Every other Honda has the fuel filter somewhere, whether it be over here or over here on the firewall, easy to get to. I feel like maybe that was something they had to do for safety regulation or something, or maybe somebody just decided it was a great idea on this car, who knows. But what I want to do is I want to take it from down there and I want to plumb it up here, and I'm going to switch it out for a 92 to 95 Civic fuel filter. The one that has the split in and out. That's what I'm going to do. I've got some lines for it, and for my fuel line I've got some Gates Barricade. This stuff right here is Gates Barricade. 4219BF. This is real fuel injection hose. This stuff you clamp on, it can handle 225 psi pressure. My car is way under that, so that should work just perfectly fine. When I go to switch the engine head out, I want to keep, for now, I want to keep my old distributor that went on the F22B1 head, and I want to keep the external coil for now. So first things first, we got to take this thing apart and get it drained and everything. In order to do that, I'm going to have to put it in the air somehow, so let me sort that out. Alright, took some work. It's not the optimal solution, but it works. Back wheels are all blocked. I lifted the front. I used a couple rims with blocks to block it up. I was going to use my actual jack stands, but there's no way that's going to be safer than doing the rims. Dirt's not really friendly with jack stands. So I've got the rims with the outside sticking up to support, and put the boards on that. That's on the pinch weld on the passenger side because I don't need it too far up. On the driver's side, on the frame rail, gotta be careful around like the fuel lines and stuff. I put a rim over there with a couple blocks on it, crisscrossed, and I have a block supporting the frame rail right there. So it's in a spot that it won't hurt anything, and it's far enough back that I can get up to the fuel filter from the bottom. Well, about as good as you can for the fuel filter in this. This will give me plenty of room to work, and I can take off the driver's side tire, and it'll be good to go, so I can start getting to work. Let's put a drain pan under here. Rock and roll. So usually I have this high up enough to use like a 5-gallon bucket, but I'm not on concrete, so I'm not going to risk it. What I found that works really well for shallow areas that are big enough for you to get under and work, but not necessarily tall enough for a bucket, is to take a Rubbermaid container, like a storage bin, and cut it down lengthwise in half and use that. So let me go see if I can find my old one. Okay, so what you'll end up with is, on top of, you'll take like a tote and cut it in half. Chunk the top part, you don't need it for this. You'll come out with something like this. Usually I cut these down lower because I try to fit them under the car on the ground, but this will work just fine. And it's taller, so it'll take more. I don't remember how much coolant this thing takes. Make sure it's clean if you're going to do like me and you're going to reuse the coolant. There's like no reason for me to throw this coolant away because I just changed it recently. Also don't want to go to a store and get some right now. And be sure if you're doing this, make sure to have a container or a couple. Like in my case, have a couple containers that I can store my antifreeze in after I get it out if I need to. If you're going to keep it in this overnight, make sure to cover that Rubbermaid container. Don't let any animals drink out of that. That is no good. Alright, so let's get to it. So we're going to drain the radiator first. Then we can crack open some bolts on the block and let all the coolant drain. First things first, we're going to undo the drain on the radiator. Drain on the radiator on these is pretty simple. I switched mine out for a 98 to 2003 model radiator. So the drain on this one, if you look at the central upper radiator hose and look straight down, it's right here. You can reach down and undo it from the top, or you can crawl under the bottom from the side and undo it. The original non-plastic brass ones have the drain on the very bottom, so say like here, complete opposite on the bottom, whereas this one has it just on the side. So we're going to crack that open. That's a little bit rough. Get it from the bottom. So here's the radiator drain, and if you turn it counterclockwise you can loosen it. There's a little drain hole right here, so you don't have to take it completely out. If you take it completely out, it'll spray straight back and go everywhere. But if you loosen it just slightly, you can let it run out just like that, and then you don't have to worry about it. Now we just wait. When this one gets done, we'll look for the drain on the block, and then we'll do that one as well. If you take the radiator cap loose, it also makes it faster as well. While this is draining, I'm going to go ahead and remove the battery. Before doing any service on the fuel system or taking anything apart on the fuel system, make sure to release the pressure in the fuel system by undoing the fuel cap. If you don't, gas will spray everywhere. It might get in your eyes and all over you, and it's not a very good time. Can't breathe very well around gasoline. Okay, so it looks like our drain slowed. I'm gonna squish all of the radiator hoses, see if I get anything else. Okay, we're going to put our drain back in. To recover coolant, I like to take myself a bucket, get myself an antifreeze jug. You can use a funnel. If you don't have a funnel, if you've got an Arizona tea bottle laying around, you can take it and just tape it to the top. And then we can pour it in there. And if anything goes outside the bottle or the funnel, it'll go into the bucket. I'm going to do this before it gets too heavy because we're going to have more coming out of the block here in a minute. Seeing a little bit of ickiness in the bottom. It's not really dirty, but it kind of seeing some. There's a little bit of nasties in the bottom, so I'm actually going to drain that into a nasties container. So now we have that coolant recovered. There's still room in this jug, so I'm going to set the bucket to the side. I'm going to wipe the remaining nasty stuff out of the bottom of the bucket. You can see a little bit of sediment on the bottom of that floating around in there. We don't want that. Well, I don't want it. It probably wouldn't hurt anything too bad, but I mean, I don't want it. Now my van, on the other hand, creates its own sediment. I can be picky about this one. I can't be picky about the van. It does it whether I like it or not. Okay, so there is a drain bolt on the back of the block next to the oil filter. I've seen technicians' notes on don't remove this if it's corroded on the outside. Because if it's corroded on the outside, it could be basically locked in and become one with the threads in the block. So if it is, I'm gonna leave it alone. So it doesn't look very bad, but I don't want to chance it. It kind of looks identical to the block, so we may have to get a little bit dirty, but I don't mind it if it lets me keep my engine. So I'm gonna start doing some real basic stuff before I go to dive into it. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to start disconnecting all of my electronic plugs. Just about all of these on this engine, since this is OBD1, have different plugs, except the throttle position sensor and the MAF sensor. Both of them have the same exact connector. So, and you do not want to get those crossed. So I'm going to use a piece of tape around the wire and the connector to tell me which one the MAP sensor is. So I'm going to disconnect it up here. And I'm going to take tape. And this will let me know, at least for me, since that's the only connector I have to worry about, that gets connected last. And these connectors have kind of like a physical memory, if you will, for when you unhook them. You know, if you bring this up, you'll see that one doesn't make it all the way up, but one does to fit this. But if you have a Civic, they're long enough to go all the way up here and connect wrong. You don't want to get that mixed up. So I'm just going to go through and just start disconnecting things. Got the temperature switch at the outlet. Distributor coil. Got a temperature switch on the thermostat right here. Unhook that. These have the same connectors, but they're so far away that it'd be impossible to get them confused. There's the EGR plug. Unplug that. Gonna disconnect the wire to the coil. There we go. I'll get these spark plug wires off. I'll be using different ones for the new engine head that's going on. Just gonna disconnect these. I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect them from my distributor. You don't have to do this, but I'm gonna do this because it's gonna give me more room to work and be cleaner. And I'm gonna have to redo them anyway. Gonna disconnect my oxygen sensor that's on my exhaust manifold, because I'm gonna need to take the exhaust manifold off, so I want to disconnect that. Alright, I'm gonna take my battery ground cable off. This isn't the stock location for it, it's actually down on the transmission, but my original one was completely dead, so I did replace it with a aftermarket. I actually went and had that made and I absolutely love it. Put that bolt back in the distributor because I'm not taking it off yet. I don't want to lose it. Ground cable's disconnected. I'll just pull this out of the way. Honda Civics newer than 2000 have a D17 in them, which has coil packs instead of a traditional distributor. Where the distributor casting would be in the engine head, they have a little block here. It's like retrofitted, so they didn't have to design a new mold for the head. So these come real in handy, because if you have to do any work where you take the distributor off, you can just plug it, and then it clears the whole thing. So if you have a junkyard near you and you like to do work on your Honda, get one of these. Pull one off of a D17. They've got an O-ring already on them, probably still usable. These things are great. I use these all the time. It's one of my favorite tools. I almost freaked out when I thought I lost it a minute ago because I didn't realize how much I used this. Invaluable, this thing. I'm going to remove the ignition coil just to get it out of the way. You have two bolts here, one there, and then there's one straight down here and one straight down here. The coil itself is held on by a bolt here and a bolt there. The ones on the bottom are 12mm, the ones on the side are 10. Alright, there's the coil. Gonna put the bolts back where they live, that way they don't get lost. Gonna disconnect the distributor plugs. Pretty obvious, they just come straight out of the distributor and off of the engine harness. Big old things. So I'm gonna take the distributor off. Here's where the part from the D17 comes in handy. When I pull the distributor off, it will want to leak oil. It'll leak a little bit. You can take that piece. Now it's sealed. Watertight. That'll actually make it so if you want to take the whole entire head off, no oil will run out of the side. Might get a little bit dripping out of the bottom, but none will be pouring out of the side, and you can actually pop that off and drain it into a bucket or drain or whatever you've got. Now that we're in here, I'm going to disconnect my temperature sender gauge. The bracket that the coil's on is held on by one 12mm bolt. Goes in this way. We'll remove that and the whole bracket will come off. I always thought it was weird that the non-Vtec engine would have an external coil compared to the Vtec engine, which has the coil inside the distributor cap. I figured for a performance application it would have had one up here on the Vtec one instead and cut costs on the non-Vtec one for the distributor, but I don't know. I didn't design them, so I have no clue what insight they had on that. But I'm not complaining because I want the use of the external coil on my Vtec head, and I have a Vtec distributor just in case. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect these transmission solenoids just to get them out of the way. There we go. There's also a transmission sensor connector. It runs from underneath the battery tray right over the radiator hose. Little green plug. This isn't absolutely necessary to remove. I'm just doing this because I like have everything out in the open and out of the way so that I can check everything. I'm going to unplug the lead to the starter here. Move all of this. Go. That's got this all loose so it can go wherever I need it to. Now I'm going to disconnect my coolant hoses. So both of the big radiator hoses I'm going to disconnect. I've got a new one to install for the bottom one. I'm going to use some pliers because this still has one of those squeeze clamps on it. Take that loose. There. Now I'm going to use a flathead to loosen the worm clamp. There we go. Be a good idea to get my bucket ready just in case. A little bit of dribble. Okay, we're going to put the hose to the side. Now for the big bottom hose. So squeeze clamps on the top. I'm just going to come in. A lot of people like to take the air cleaner off first to get it out of the way. I keep it on so I don't get anything in the throttle body. So if your lower radiator hose hasn't been changed in forever, it's going to be very stubborn and hard to get off like mine. It's still got the original squeeze clamp on it. So I'm going to have to wrestle it a little bit. Got it. Now look down on the bottom of the radiator. This still has squeeze clamps on the bottom of the hose, so we'll have to take that off. Okay, so we got that undone from the bottom. Just gonna pull this guy out. Alright, put it to the side and we have a brand new one we can replace that with. Okay, now I'm gonna disconnect the idle air control valve. The connector for it is right underneath the canister. Just pinch and push down. Right behind that is evap control solenoid. This guy right here. I'm actually going to leave that there because it's not wanting to unplug for me, but that's okay because it just runs on the firewall, so we'll keep that there. On the Accords, this is your cruise control. Comes around because this bracket comes down to the throttle drum here. Comes over here to the secondary one. This is your throttle cable. It goes to your foot, to your pedal, comes down, comes over here, goes to the throttle drum right up front, connects here. This one over here comes up from your transmission, comes over, connects here, and connects to the inside of the throttle drum here. These brackets are held on by 10 millimeters. So there's a 10 here for the transmission cable. And that disconnects from the throttle drum. And it needs to be cleaned. Corroded on the very end. Put the bolt back in the bracket, that way it doesn't go anywhere. Now we've got this bracket Before we remove this bracket completely, I'm going to break these nuts loose that hold the line on the bracket so that we can move these completely apart independent of each other. I want to readjust all this. You could just lay this to the side and not worry about it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to want to readjust all of this. So I'm going to leave the cruise control connected to the bracket only, because I can always readjust the throttle. And I know that new head's going to be a different type of responsive than this. We can disconnect the throttle. Go. Get that out of the way. I'm going to put the bolts back in the holes that they came from so they don't get lost. And we're going to disconnect the cruise control from its barrel, which needs to be cleaned horribly. This goes into a sub-assembly, apparently. Okay, cool. So the wire, there's a thicker and a slimmer part on the cruise control wire. On the cable, there's like an insulated part and a braided part. If you get it back to the braided part, it pops out of the plastic holder. I'm just going to scoot all the electronics out of the way. Remove this. Ooh, that's on there. Yeah, I may wind up replacing that. That's on there. I'm going to have to cut that to get it off of there. Well, yeah, it's definitely been on there since 1994. It's got 94 on the hose. Right there. Okay. Now this is just plugged off. That's just on there. Alright, I'm going to start taking the intake air cleaner off. Then the stock Phillips head clamps, and then a flathead worm clamp. Okay. Pull the whole thing off and out of the way. Now we have all this room for activities. So there's a heater hose that runs from under where the distributor was on the engine head, runs from there back to the heater valve, which I have all new hoses to replace all of that. And boy, do they need it. Alright. So we got this clamp off, and we got that one off right there. Now we can take that off. Yeah, this is just, I can feel it ripping. I'm just going to cut those. There it goes. Throw my pan under there. Yeah, I'm not going to chance breaking my heater valve. Now we're getting all the water out of the heater core. Now we can take this off, keep the clamps, and throw the hose away. While that's draining, I'm going to undo these. This is just a loop. That's enough. Come on. You know you want to. There you go. And there. Cool. In the pile. So there are shortcuts that you can take while taking this apart. I'm doing a bit of an overhaul and hopefully some painting. I went ahead and got a bunch of the random seals. Say for instance, O-rings that go on the water pipe, thermostat gasket, thermostat housing gasket, all of that I already got. So I'm totally fine with just tearing into this. Okay, so on the EGR I do not have a crow's foot wrench that's a 12 mil. I have everything around it. I have a 13, I have a 14. Do not have a 12. Swivel with a short 12. Just fits. Oh my god. Woo! Gonna need a pipe for that one. That's crazy. Let's give her what she's got, Captain. What broke? Did it break free or did my shit break? Ah, it broke free. Okay, let's try the other side. God, that is close. Can't get it quite right. I'm gonna take these connectors off real quick. I may have to take the throttle body off first before I can even get to that. So the throttle body comes off with 4 bolts. Got one here, here, one directly here, and then one right here. Careful not to lose the top left and bottom right ones because they're nuts and not bolts. Bolts on these are the same size, so don't have to worry about getting them mixed up. The water connections on the bottom. So there's one underneath the mouth of the throttle. I get that. Let's see, there's an electrical harness you can pull electrical wires out of, and then it pulls off. I need to take it to the bucket because it's got coolant in it. I'm gonna put my bolts back in and disconnect the Pcv valve from the plenum here. Oh, like so. Just gonna move it out of the way. See where we get this time. Try a baby wrench again. Nope, not even. I don't even think you could get a flex head tiny socket wrench in there. That's insanity. Okay. Regular wrench again. Regular wrench fits without the throttle. A regular wrench fits. Rather, if we can get it to turn, is another story of its own. I really wanted this off so that I could check out the passages and clear everything. Ooh, I would break a line wrench. Shit. Okay, so the EGR is going to stay onto the car till I can get a 12mm crow's foot to be able to remove it. Okay, next step is I'm going to document where all my vacuum hoses are out, everything on the intake manifold. So on this side of the intake manifold on the plenum, you have this little rectangle with 2 vacuum ports. The top one goes over here and connects to the bottom pipe. Bottom pipe comes over here. Bottom pipe connects to this hose, which goes down, loops under to the center of this guy. Then the other hose goes from the bottom of this down and goes to the bottom of this vacuum port here on the bottom. This one up top comes up and over is the top pipe, runs over, comes over here, runs down, comes to this pipe on the fuel rail, runs through, comes over, plugs into the EGR. This bottom port comes over, goes to the fuel rail on the pipe, comes up over here, goes to the fuel pressure regulator. Top port on the back of the plenum goes over, comes over. It's one pipe that does nothing. Hooks the bottom pipe. Bottom pipe hooks on, runs over, plugs into the right side of a can that's under here. Bottom port runs out of here, goes over, plugs into the bottom of that evap solenoid. Top of that evap solenoid, right over here. Top one goes down, hooks the bottom Fuel pressure regulator runs down and hooks to a weird L pipe that comes off of the frame of the car. Brake booster comes up here, goes to the one-way valve, runs over, connects to the back of the plenum. Okay, I'm gonna take off the fuel injection. I have to use a little pick to get the clips off the fuel injector. I think you can see this pretty well. What is that? Cylinder number 2. So you got these little clips here and here that you have to unclip. So you can use a flathead. The pick's just much easier. They will pop off occasionally completely. When they do, you'll want to make sure to catch them. But they unplug after you undo the locks on them. So I'm going to get all these undone. I can seat the clips back into the connectors, and then that way they auto clip next time you put them on, and you won't lose them that way. Fuel rail has been disconnected electronically. Go ahead and take this annoying pipe assembly off if you want to. You could leave it on there. I'm going to go ahead and take it off just in case I get wild with the paint. Okay, this pipe assembly's off. Go ahead and get this vacuum tubing off of the regulator. So, I just noticed. So what looks like a testing port over here and the fuel pressure regulator. These look like these have the same exact setup like for mounts. I'm almost curious if you can switch these. I'm just going to disconnect the fuel line because I can leave all this intact. There's just the fuel line that goes right there, which means I can plug the fuel line with a bolt, and then I won't have to smell the fuel from that one. I actually managed to do that. Cool. So the fuel rail connects right here, and it's a 17. Damn, that popped loose hard. You can tell it's been a while since this has been off. That's the loudest crack I've ever heard from a fuel line on a Honda. You gotta be careful because these have washers. Gotta keep up with. You're supposed to replace them, but you can reuse them. So the fuel rail has 3 10mm nuts that hold it on. I'm just gonna loosen those. This can press up and pop the whole fuel rail up. I think next I'm gonna disconnect the brake booster. Larger diameter hoses like to cooperate. That's very nice. I'm going to preemptively loosen the intake manifold top bolts. You can just take the fuel rail off and use a ratchet, but I'm going to try to keep from getting dirt down in here. So I'm going to use a ratcheting wrench to knock them loose. Got it. Okay, to get more electronics out of the way, I'm going to remove the alternator electronics and throw them out of the way. So unplug that, put the booty back over it. Bottom connector is a 10mm. Right. Disconnect that and put the nut back on the alternator. I have this rigged up here. I'm just going to cut that. That's an old rig. Alright, throw that out of the way. Alright, we want to take this ground loose. There's a ground that runs from here over to the motor mount. We'll take that loose. Okay, that's loose. We can pull that out of the way. I'm going to preemptively crack loose all of the nuts on the exhaust manifold. So all these are loosened. Alright, and that'll be ready for when I go to take that off. I think I can move all the power steering stuff over to the side over here to be able to work on it. I may have to take my horn off for the time being. Let me see, how did I mount that? How did I mount that? Holy shit, I did well at mounting that. Hell, there it is. I'll have to do a video showing how I did that. That was really smooth. Alright, I'm just going to disconnect those, push them out of the way. That'll give me enough room to be able to move all the power steering out of the way. So I'm going to pick up on the reservoir, that'll get that loose. Have a 12 mil here, 10 mils here. In here. Take that out. Right. Got one on the bottom, which is a 12. Can pull the belt off now. And we can pull this out of the way. Okay. Honestly, I think I am going to disconnect that line. I didn't want to, but kind of the way things are going. These are both 10s. They're a lot easier to undo when the pump's connected. But I believe I've had them off before, so not too hard. And you want to have something to put this line in, like a plastic bag, because it's going to start running a lot. Don't worry, the outside's dirty, the inside's not. I'm just kind of wiggle it until it pops out. And we're just going to put it in the bag. Now we can really move this out of the way. So we got plenty of area to move our power steering pump. I'm going to wipe this off really good. I'm going to put a little bit of duct tape over that. Move it as flat as humanly possible. May have to clean it off when I get back to it. But at least I don't have to worry about anything getting in it. So now this can be moved freely. I'm going to remove this power steering pump reservoir bracket. There we go. Now it's pretty. It just sits in the corner there. And that is perfect. Let's put this bracket here. Excellent. That gives me plenty of room to work now. So now we can take the alternator off. So you have a tensioner up front that takes a 10 mil. You have a nut on the bottom. And then you have this bolt. Top bolt is a 14. And the tension adjustment is a 10. So now we got the bottom nut loose. Work with the tensioner. And if you loosen the bolt, it loosens the tension on the belt. There we go. Now we can slide the belt off. And if we take the bottom nut off, take this bolt out, we can take the alternator off. There we go. You just have to pull towards yourself. You still have to take the tensioner bolt all the way out, which is quite annoying. Oh, there it goes. You can pull the bottom one out of the back. So you just push it this way, and it'll come out. Alternator's out. So here you can see the mechanism that I was fighting with. Here's the nut that goes on the bottom of the alternator, and here's the adjustment bolt. It goes into this little collar. Okay, so now we gotta get all these brackets off of here now. All 14. dipstick tube is held on by the front of the bracket. So I want to make sure to get that loose. Ironically, the whole point of this is to get this bracket off so that you can put the new head on without it being in the way. I'm sure there's probably a way you still could, but I want to be extra thorough. Okay, all of these bolts are the same length, so I don't have to worry about getting those mixed up. I'm gonna spray the belt off because some power steering got on it. So I'm just gonna hit it with some brake clean because I'd like to save this belt. Not that I'm gonna be using it for the swap, but I may want to use it on something else later, you know. Well, I reckon it's almost time for a beer and a snack. Before I go in, I feel like there's two things I need to do before I head in and take a break. One, connect the fuel hose back up so any fumes can't escape. Two, put the throttle body on so no dirt daubers can get into my shit. Three, plug that hole up and plug this hole up. There we go. That'll keep me from getting in any trouble. Just gonna sit this on here, and I'm just gonna put a single nut on that. That'll be enough to deter most things that would try to go off in there. It's just a few hours of taking my time, no rushing. Got all this off, all the coolant on this side taken apart, most stuff taken apart on this side, and the vacuum hoses and everything disconnected, fuel line disconnected, electronics disconnected. Pretty much all that's left is to deal with the front and crawl up underneath there and get that intake unbolted and then start attacking it.